All right, let's start with the Warriors. So I want to start with the before we actually get to the nuts and bolts of the basketball. I have two refereeing or officiating related things that I want to hit on. Starting with the Draymond suspension, which was obviously the big story from this specific game. I at first couldn't tell what had happened, and the clips that were being circulated around that I had seen up close to a million times were the jersey pull. And in general, like, I'm the kind of guy that when I am talking about officiating, particularly when it comes to ejections, I want to see absolute, like, the unquestionable, you can't leave this guy in the game type of stuff. And so at first when I was like, okay, he's pulling his jersey down. Yeah, it's a little bit dangerous. You could argue he's actually trying to kind of gather Brandon Clark and help him fall type of deal, right? Like, to me, what didn't seem as dirty. So I was amazed at the fact that they would ever even consider suspending him for something as trivial as that. But then I saw the other angles, and I saw the swing down, hitting Brandon Clark on the face. And I mean, we can really make it this simple. There's a very specific reason why players are discouraged from hitting each other in the face in the game. And it's because they don't want to get ejected. That we have to have a line somewhere. And in this case, the line is, like, if you load up and you hit a guy in the face and it's not a real basketball play, then yeah, you got to eject the guy. And love Draymond Green, love everything he brings to the Warriors, but to me, that was a pretty cut and dry ejection. And obviously, Draymond Green's going to have some fun with the crowd in that type of moment. You know what was interesting is that ejection changed the entire complexion of the game in a bunch of ways that are going to be difficult to translate forward in the series because Draymond's going to play a lot. But there was a kind of a brand of basketball that Golden State played after Draymond went out that was very unique, and we will get to that in a minute. I want to talk about crunch time here first. So obviously you have this stretch where Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson play really well, keeps Golden State in the game. Well, Steph hits a monster three with about 4 minutes left, or right around 4 or 5 minutes left. And Ja Morant came back with this incredible sequence where he drives to the basket and gets this, like, acrobatic up and under layup in transition. Then he runs back on defense and reads a rotation from Klay Thompson. Steph makes a beautiful skip pass to the corner to Klay Thompson. And Ja, like, closes out like he's going to close at Klay, but instead of closing at Klay, he closed to the passing lane. So he closed to the spot next to Klay. Klay turned and made the swing pass to the next shooter and hit Ja right in the hands. And then Ja drives right down the floor and immediately kind of navigates into the lane and hits Brandon Clark for a layup under the rim. And now we're tied. It was an unbelievable sequence from Ja Morant on both ends of the floor. He's a bad defensive player at this point in his career, but he shows these flashes with his athleticism where he can make defensive plays. And that's a great foundation to build on as he gets older and more experienced to become a more impactful defensive player. There was a play kind of late in the game tied where Ja Morant got Jordan Poole on an island at the top of the key. It was right around 2 minutes left. And one of the things we talked about before this series was we know for a fact that Klay Thompson and Steph Curry and Jordan Poole are going to struggle to guard Ja Morant in space. That's just that he's too fast and he's too skilled, and it's just a bad matchup for them. Steph and Klay, Klay is very good at guarding bigger, more physical wings. Steph is a very good defensive player for the set of physical tools that he has, but there's very few players on the planet that can hope to contain Ja Morant in dribble drive situations. So you have to crowd him in those situations. And I thought it was really, really interesting, the difference in their defense on that play when Jordan Poole when Ja Morant blew right by Jordan Poole and got the layup for the and one. But there was a pivotal play late in the game after Klay Thompson made the three to give Golden State the lead, where the exact same thing happened on the left wing, where Ja Morant got Steph Curry on an island. But instead of leaving him on the island, Golden State sent quicker help before Ja got even close to the rim. He ended up going into a ton of traffic and missing a layup. And that's the difference. You can give up a matchup to a guy like Ja as long as there's tons of backside help. Where you get in trouble is when everyone stands around and gets glued up to their man, and now Ja has a head of steam because he goes right by Jordan Poole. And when you give an athlete like that that much of a head of steam, there's just no way you're going to stop him around the basket. But Golden State made the adjustment and ended up getting the all-important stop at the end of the game against Ja Morant. This was not the play after the jump ball, but the one before where Ja Morant missed the layup over Steph going to the left. Then I was really curious when they were setting up for the inbounds play. They had Desmond Bane as the inbounder, and I was hoping for Memphis's sake that they would run something, because they had Jaren Jackson Jr. as the first player right by the inbounder with Jordan Poole on him. So I was thinking they were just going to inbound to Jordan Poole or to inbound to Jaren Jackson and do a quick handoff to Desmond Bane for a jump shot, because I thought they could get a clean look from that. Instead, they had Ja Morant start out at half court, and they did the exact same thing, but instead of looking to Bane, they looked to Ja Morant with a head of steam. The problem is that's the play you see coming a mile away. This is why we talked about this on the play where Andrew Wiggins and Otto Porter Jr. botched that post entry, that like lob over the top on that late inbounds play against Denver, and all the Warriors fans were mad at Steve Kerr. There's a reason why you use your stars as decoys in a lot of situations in those settings, especially when they're shorter players, and it's because the defense keys in on them and it's difficult for them to create their own shot in that situation. Ja Morant went flying into a ton of traffic and had to take this impossible left-handed scoop shot off of the glass. Don't play. Golden State knew that was coming. They were set up to guard Ja Morant in the paint. There was only 3 seconds left, so you knew that as soon as Ja put the ball on the floor, he wasn't going to have time to make a kick out to a shooter. I would have gone to one of your taller players, someone like Jaren Jackson Jr., someone like Desmond Bane, to try to get a catch and shoot opportunity, because I think you could have gotten a better look in that situation. But just an incredibly interesting and an incredibly exciting game. I thought what allowed Golden State to stay so successful in the second half without Draymond is the very thing that I've talked about so much on this show over the course of the last 5 years, or over the course of the last 2 years, and that's 5-out basketball. They, to start the second half, Steph hit a bunch of threes to kind of keep him in it. It was a lot of Kevon Looney, right? But then they took Kevon Looney out, and they brought in Otto Porter Jr., they brought in Gary Payton, and they brought in Jonathan Kuminga as your front court. So basically they went with 2 freak athletes and another 6'8" guy, all 3 of which are very good at the dirty work things. Otto Porter Jr. has been a masterful rebounder for Golden State over the course of this playoff run. It's been a huge weapon for them to make up for some of their lack of size. Well, they just went with those 3 guys and Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole. And the offense with Draymond Green works. So I'm not trying to talk about that. It's just a different type of offense. The difference when Draymond's on the floor is he gets ignored a lot of the time. And what ends up happening is Steph and Klay will hit Draymond when he's open and then immediately cut off of him. Because Draymond is like, instead of catching and shooting, they look at Draymond as basically an available dribble handoff. So they'll throw the ball to Draymond Green at the top of the key, and then they'll fly off of him, and Draymond will do a quick handoff. They're almost just they just use him as a release valve to get the ball back. It's not like a spot up role for Draymond by any stretch of the imagination. That's why he doesn't take a ton of spot up threes, right? Well, that's a completely different style of offense than when they have all 5 players as guys that are a little bit more of an offensive threat. And so as a result, Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson at the end of the third quarter and beginning of the fourth quarter were given a boatload of space to operate, and both of them put on masterful performances in that second half. The super interesting thing about the way that they attack those 2 guys in particular when they're on the floor together is it's kind of like they build off of each other's advantages. So what'll happen is like Jordan Poole will bring the ball up the floor, and he'll be being guarded, by someone like Desmond Bane, right? And he'll bring over Ja Morant's man to come over and set a screen, whoever that is, whether that's Klay Thompson or Gary Payton Jr. or whoever it is. So Gary Payton Jr. will come set the screen, and Jordan Poole will come off of that screen, and Ja Morant does not want to switch because Memphis is trying to hide Ja Morant as much as possible in this series. So as a result, Jordan Poole will get into the lane a little bit. So get into about like that 10, 15-foot area with a live dribble. And the defense collapses on him, right? But Jordan Poole doesn't force anything. He'll kick it out to the perimeter again to Klay Thompson. Now someone's closing out at Klay Thompson. Now Klay Thompson has an advantage. Klay Thompson will usually like pump fake and get the guy off his feet and then put the ball on the floor. Now he's got even more separation than Jordan Poole did in his first attack. And then either they'll score on that action or it'll get worked around again to Jordan Poole. By this time, the defense has rotated and collapsed like 3 times, and they're getting fantastic looks out of it. Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson and their ability to further compromise the defense with each time they attack a closeout off of that first action is what keeps that thing moving so smoothly, and how they kept getting such good shots, especially when they go in that 5-out setting. So the trick is like, how can you realistically apply that forward in this series with Draymond on the floor? Well, you try to play heavily into that style when Draymond's off. What I would do is Draymond talked a lot on his show about how he likes playing with Kevon Looney, because Kevon Looney plays a more traditional backline defensive role, and then Draymond can really roam around and be disruptive elsewhere on the floor. Maybe that's your opportunity to play Looney. And then in the minutes when Draymond's off the floor, you go back into that Kuminga, Otto Porter Jr., and Gary Payton Jr. front court, because then you have that super freak mobility with all of the shooting on the floor, and that's when you're getting all that 5-out stuff that you can get. I think there's a way for them to utilize that type of offense even with Draymond in there, because you're better with Draymond. You're flat out better with Draymond because he makes you way better on the defensive end of the floor, and you can still thrive on offense because of all the chemistry that he has with Steph and Klay, hunting them as three-point shooters. So that was the most interesting dynamic of this particular game, was the way that the offense looked when Draymond was out. So moving on to Memphis really quick. You could tell, and this was evidenced in points in the paint. In points in the paint, Golden State dominated in this game. And a huge part of that was, like I was saying, getting in the defense and rotation. But you were seeing a lot of opportunities for guys like Jonathan Kuminga on the backline, guys like Gary Payton Jr. on the backline, Otto Porter Jr. on the backline. That's where they were getting offensive rebound putbacks. That's where they were getting cuts to the basket for layups. There was a huge play at the end of the game where Steph Curry was working on the left side of the floor, and they completely lost Andrew Wiggins on the backside as a cutter, and he ended up getting a layup that tied the game. Having that speed and savvy on the back line was giving lots of generating lots of quality stuff for Golden State. Couple things that were really interesting for Memphis that are concerning if you're a Memphis fan. Jaren Jackson Jr. shot the lights out. He made 6 threes. Ja Morant made 4 threes. I've talked a lot about how I think Ja Morant is going to project forward as a good shooter as he gets older, but right now he's pretty inconsistent. For you to lose a game at home with Jaren Jackson Jr. giving you 6 threes, there was a sequence there in the second half where the dude was flat out gunning off the catch early in the shot clock as the trailing big man and knocking down like 26, 27-foot threes. That's tough to replicate. And as you saw, when the Warriors had their defense set, they did a good job of containing Ja Morant in dribble drive scenarios. Where they struggled is when they weren't set and when they got too lazy off the ball and gave Ja Morant opportunities against weaker defenders on an island. But that'll be an interesting thing moving forward, is how well can Ja Morant shoot? How well can Jaren Jackson Jr. shoot? Because they're not getting great stuff in the paint. You saw that in the points in the paint battle tonight. Looking forward in this series, it's just going to be curious to see. I talked a lot about how Memphis's physical advantages will be what carries them as the series progresses. In the first half, the Warriors actually out offensive rebounded Memphis. They had 10 and Memphis had 8. In the second half, Memphis started to wear them out on the offensive glass a little bit. We all know how that goes. When the team has the physical advantages, you can make up for it with effort to a certain extent, but the longer the games go, the longer the series go, that's when those advantages become problematic. And there are simple physical mismatch type of matchups out there that are just going to be difficult to deal with the entire series. There was a play late in the game, an inbounds play, baseline out of bounds. Klay Thompson is guarding Brandon Clark. That's a huge mismatch. Well, guess what they did? They ran Desmond Bane out to the perimeter, made it look like Brandon Clark was going to set a screen for him to get out there, and then Brandon Clark just kind of rolled around to the front of the rim, and they just threw it up to Brandon Clark right over the front of the rim. Klay Thompson had absolutely no chance there because Brandon Clark is just bigger and taller and more athletic. And they got an easy layup out of that in crunch time, when Golden State's really dialed in defensively. So those are going to be Memphis's greatest advantage as the series progresses. They're never going to outskill Golden State. Golden State's backcourt is the most skilled backcourt in the entire NBA. They have no chance there, but they can win physical matchups with Golden State. That's going to be the curious part as we move forward in this series, is how well can Memphis inflict those things on Golden State over the course of the series. I'm still leaning Golden State. I just still think it's going to be a long series. I could see this one going 6 or 7 games easily.